Hi everyone, and welcome back to Hear the Rare Voices of the DIPG community. My name is Rachna Prasad. I know it's been a while since you've heard from me, but I'm back. I've had a lot going on these past few months, and I just had to take some time to myself to get through some academic work, to process some things happening in my personal life, but I'm back, and I really want to continue having this platform to give to the various perspectives of the DIPG DMG community. So just to give you a little context of what I've been up to, I applied to medical school in May and July. It's a very long process. During this time, Jace, who you all know is the inspiration behind this podcast series, he passed away. And so I took some time to also grieve that, and I feel ready to start these again. But I think that for me, the only way to move forward, the only way to continue the series is by having a episode that cherishes our friendship and also talks a little bit about grief, because I think unfortunately this is such a common and important part of the DIPG path that many families take, and I think it's something that I want to address in my podcast before getting back to the interviews that you all know and love. So Jace and I first began to talk during the first interview that I had with him and Dr. Nick Vitanza in May of 2020 for DIPG Awareness Day. And after that event, actually, Jace and I kind of came to the same conclusion that we had a lot of fun doing this interview, and we realized it was a great platform to share information on, since so many people end up viewing our interview video. And so we talked about it, and I figured, you know what, I can make this a reality. And while I admit I have not been the best at it, I do want to honor this idea that Jace and I came up with together, and by telling him that I would continue doing this, I really want to keep my word, and so I will get better at making these, and I hope you guys are enjoying coming on this journey with me. Even though my friendship with Jace was shorter than I would have wanted, I appreciated every second of his presence in my life. He reminded me a lot of my brother, and even our friendship with each other kind of resembled the one that I had with my brother. I really had no idea how someone could have that amount of courage and strength like Jace did. And the thing is, he would say the same thing about me. We tried a lot often to hide our pain from each other, because I thought what he was going through was the worst thing anyone could go through, and he thought that what I had been through was the worst that anyone could be going through. So there was, again, this like kind of mutual respect and awe that I think my brother and I also shared with each other. And this is something I really cherish, to have this kind of relationship with someone all over again. But still, Jace and I had a lot of fun. We would text often, FaceTime often, since I was in Zurich, and he was back home in Kansas or traveling to California. And we shared our stories and gave advice to each other. Often I'd find myself ranting to him about my problems, or he would do the same with me, and we would either laugh at each other or give meaningful advice, usually both. But I really, truly loved him like a brother, and I truly cherish every second that I was able to spend with him, texting or talking, whatever it was. And you know, of course, I wish he was here, but I also know that, like my brother, Jace wouldn't have wanted to live the way that unfortunately a lot of children with DIPG have to live. And I know in my heart that he has met my brother in heaven, and that kind of gives me some comfort. While this grief is still fresh, since we're passing 3 months of Jace's death, I also wanted to use this podcast to kind of talk about how grief has shaped my life, how I process it, how it's not just about, oh, you're so strong, or you're really getting through this. Like, there are days that are truly, truly horrible, and you don't know how to get through them, and no one talks about these days. And of course, I do want to mention, before I kind of start talking about this, that this is my story. This is the way I process grief. This is the way I have dealt with my these issues that are in my life, but it's by no means the same for everyone. In fact, I think everyone grieves very, very differently, but I'm hoping that by sharing my story, it encourages other people to share theirs, and hopefully we can kind of respect and admire and really acknowledge that each of us has a different way of going about grief, and that's okay, and everything is acceptable. There is no right or wrong, we just have to process losing our loved ones just the only way we know how, and that's kind of what I wanted to use this podcast for. So for me, when I'm reminded of my brother and the grief that I went through after his passing, there's a type of pain that I always get in my chest, and the only way I can really describe it is that my heart physically hurts. Like, it feels like there is just a pain right at the center of my chest. And I definitely felt the same way when I first heard that Jace was not doing too well, and he could be passing within the next few days. And then when I was talking with Lisa, his mom, I remember trying to be really strong and hold it together for her, because I couldn't even imagine. I remember the pain my mom felt, and I was sure that she was feeling the same kind of pain. And I kind of just waited after that to hear news, since I was in Zurich and the time difference, and I didn't sleep much. And it was all very similar in some sense to what was happening with my brother, but it was also different because, of course, it was not my family. I was physically so far from him and his family, so it was definitely a different experience. But that one thing that's the same is that pain that I felt in my chest. And then once I had gotten news that Jace had passed, I felt this really weird, surreal feeling, because I hadn't seen him often in person. A lot of our calls and texts were obviously over FaceTime. And I had gone to visit him in June because he was at Stanford for a long time, and I figured, maybe I should just go see him and see how he's doing. I had a gap in my medical school applications, and I'm so thankful and grateful and that I did that, because it was the last time I got to see him, and I surprised him with a visit, and I just remember his face, and he was so shocked and happy, and that brought me a lot of joy. And after he passed, I took a few days to process, and then I watched his celebration of life live online, and I cried hearing how his friends would talk about him and all the love and admiration he had from people. And this for me was something really important, because I think it gave me the closure that I needed. And just looking at how many lives Jace had touched, through the events that he attended, the talks he gave, it was truly, really remarkable. And to see everyone come together in this event, I'm so glad that I was able to experience that, even if it was over a computer. Jace was just that kind of person who really touched lives everywhere he went. And this is another quality that I think reminds me of my brother. My brother was also someone who left an impact anywhere he went, even if it was for a second. Everyone remembered his name. I'm really, at the end of the day, I'm really so grateful that I was able to meet Jace and I became friends with him. I think being loved by someone as amazing as he is something that I will cherish forever. And he has taught me so much. He has challenged many of my views and pushed me to be the best version of myself that I can be. I really believe that my life has changed since Jace has been in it, and I'm very, very thankful for this. And to get back to the topic of grief in general, I think that the thing about grief is that, especially at a young age, I think there's not a lot of people who have felt it at the same intensity as losing a brother or losing a mom or a dad, or a sister. I think that there's not a lot of people who understand that kind of pain, and I wouldn't want anyone to. I wouldn't wish this upon anyone, but I think that people didn't talk to me about my brother or about Jace because it made them uncomfortable to some extent. I think that they thought that by bringing it up, I would be reminded of these people in my life and the grief that I was going through, or their, the treatment, their death, whatever it is. And the thing is, I kind of found it funny that they thought they would remind me of this pain, because the truth is, and I think everyone who has shared this experience knows, like, no one has to remind us of it. It's with us every single day, whether it is said out loud by another person or not. We, in one way or the other, something reminds us of our loved one, or something reminds us of the grief, or whatever it is. And I don't think there's really a day that has gone by without me remembering one of these things, just for a fraction of a second even. And I think this is something that a lot of people who have been through the same things that I've been through agree on, is that we don't need to be reminded, because we truly remember every single day. And in fact, for me personally, I love it when people ask me questions about my brother or Jace and our relationships especially. I want to keep their memory alive by talking about it over and over again. And I think this is the part that maybe people who are supporters of families and stuff should really hear and listen to, because I think this is true for a lot of people. And if it's not, you can always ask, right? Like, would you like to talk about your son, daughter, brother, sister? Would you like to share with me your favorite memories? And if they grieve differently, and if this is not really how they process things, they can say no, and then we drop it. But I think that a lot of people I've talked to say how appreciative they are of when people ask them about their loved ones, because they can kind of share who they were with the world. And I think that is really beautiful. And I hope that more people can understand this. I know it's a very hard topic to talk about, but I think there's a lot of beautiful things that can come out of having these conversations. And that is how my experience with grief has been. Another thing that I've thought a lot about when it comes to grief is whether I felt the same pain I did when my brother first passed, or and whether I just feel the same intensity of the pain, just less frequently, or is the pain less than it was when he first passed. I think they're two different things, and I think a lot of people may feel one or the other. They think that time, it just gets distant, but when you feel it, you feel the same pain. Or some other people think that maybe we just start to feel less and less and less of the original pain that we felt. And I think I've thought about this a lot. And for me, I think I do feel the same pain, just less frequently. It used to be every day, and then it was a few times a week, and then it was once a week, then every few weeks, once a month, a few times a year, and so on. And I think, of course, always it got worse near birthdays, large events, death anniversaries. But I think that when I feel this pain, I feel the same crippling pain in my heart that truly sometimes it brings me to my knees. And I think this is the part that people don't really talk about. There'll be days where I'm just in my room thinking everything's normal, and something will just wash over me, and I'll have a memory that was really painful, and I feel that same intensity of that physical pain in my chest. And I think I've also come to realize when I do feel this kind of pain, there's nothing that will make it better. I just have to kind of sit on my bed, cry, look at pictures and videos of my brother, and just feel that grief. And sometimes it's disruptive. It disrupts my regular daily life, and I can be in the middle of a social gathering and this will happen. And I think that's the part no one wants to talk about. And I understand it's so hard to talk about, because we don't want to seem like we're different from other people. We don't want to get any kind of pity, but truly it happens unexpectedly. And when it does, I can't cheer myself up, and I can't just make myself snap out of it. I think I just have to feel it. I have to cry it out. I have to feel my grief. And I think it's really important to do, because in a way for me, it's also like I'm respecting my loved ones who have passed. I'm giving them the time that they deserve for me to remember them and remember who they were in my life. So even though it's really hard to talk about, and it maybe disrupts my regular work day, I think for me in some ways it's very necessary, and I'm really almost thankful to have these moments, because it reminds me that I have been through a lot. I am still human, and I hope that more people are both understanding and allow themselves to take this time, right? I think it's very important that we all do this. And this is just my opinion and my perspective and the way I like to process my grief. But I do think it's just something so important to feel, because by letting those emotions out, I know I'm not building it up in my heart, and it's like a release that I really need to have to kind of wake up the next day fresh and ready to face the world all over again. And so this is kind of my experience with grief and my reality of life after loss. And it brings me to the end of this episode of Hear the Rare. Thank you so much for joining me once again. I hope you're excited as I am to get these podcasts up and running again. If you have similar or different experiences and stories to the one that I've just shared about my journey with grief with my brother and Jace, I would love to hear them, whether it's a discussion about how we are similar or a discussion about how we are different. I would love to have all perspectives of the grief journey on this channel. So please reach out if you want to talk about it, if you want to be on a podcast. Again, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Hear the Rare podcast, and you can just send us a message there. You can also email at heartherare@gmail.com. And then all my podcasts are on heartherare.org. The video is posted there, or also on all the podcast platforms as an audio version. Thank you for joining me once again. As always, I like to end with some gratitude, and my gratitude for this episode goes to Jace. He is such a courageous DIPG warrior and a phenomenal human being. I know he has changed the world and made it a better place, and I am so, so thankful to have been able to be loved by him, to have been able to love him, and I really, really cherish our friendship. Thank you, and see you next time on Hear the Rare.